A Passion for Mushrooms by Chronological. Chapter 27. Gifts Unreturned. The kings on the walls seemed to stare at the hobbit in disapproval. When Bilbo had first seen the intricate stone mosaics that decorated the Hall of History, he'd been impressed by their artistry. Great dwarven kings of the past, with lofty faces and shining armor, made fantastic showings of prowess and prosperity, seeming to offer these things to the onlooker bold enough to follow their lead. After publicly embarrassing himself, Bilbo thought the kings appeared to taunt instead. In reality, the gold and jewels they gestured for visitors to take were nothing but polished stone. Of course, that was all gold and gemstones ever were. Someone who wanted warm growing things was unlikely to find happiness with people who only ever offered cold mathoms. He wished Thorin had not given him the mushroom. No one had ever put food into Bilbo's mouth before. Oh, he'd had a dalliance or two in the Shire, but never in his life had he experienced something so intimate. Thorin had not even used a fork. But Bilbo knew it meant nothing. How did he take advantage of that very fact to feed Thorin so often himself? Those wasps had come home to nest. He could not now tell the king that such an act was tantamount to stripping a hobbit naked. For in the end, were not the rules of civility just another layer of clothing between a gentle hobbit and the world? Bilbo knew that his friends, and indeed most of the dwarves in the room, were staring at him, but he could not calm himself. Willing the red from his cheeks was impossible. Slowing his breath seemed even less likely. All he could hope for was that further evidence of his deplorable state could not be witnessed through his thick woolen trousers.
I do not believe I knew before this day the form of a hobbit's desire, but I think all of Erebor has seen it now,
Tauriel murmured, taking Bilbo gently by the arm. Hush! Bilbo hissed, swallowing art and forcing himself to meet her eyes. It is not polite to speak that way in public! Tilting her head to the side made Tauriel look even more youthful than usual.
A strange day indeed when a hobbit asks an elf to speak less plainly. As you wish.
Sorry. Bilbo felt immediately guilty. I did not mean to be so short with you. It is only that it is so very difficult for me to... Oh, bother! This is all rather difficult for me. Shall I make amends in the dwarvish fashion? I am quite dwarvish in my customs these days.
I want neither silver shire pennies nor golden Ereborian crowns of you. If your tone offended, it is forgotten. Rather, I would have you hear me.
I am listening, my lady.
You were not in Lake Town when Keely first spoke his love to me. Have I ever shown you the courting gift he gave me then?
No, Bilbo said slowly. Presumably she was attempting to distract him, which was very kind. Tauriel was not the type to speak of personal matters lightly, and he was grateful to her for making the effort. At least I do not believe you have made a production of it. However, I have seen the archer's ring which you wear upon your thumb many times. It is beautiful craftsmanship, mithril, I believe. Flashing a brilliant smile, Tauriel seemed to realize something.
Ah, rings are a very common courting gift among dwarves. Indeed, Keely was not risen from his sick bed 2 days before he gave me this. As craft comes from the hands, so a dwarf in love seeks to decorate the hands of his beloved one with precious things. But this was not the gift that began our courtship.
Oh? Looking with interest at her elegant hands, Bilbo did not see evidence of another ring. Do you not wear it? Did it not fit? There was something fiercely triumphant in Tauriel's grin as she drew a smooth green runestone from a pocket of her gown.
Perhaps not the most noble of gifts, nor the easiest for me to carry, but he could not wait to speak. No sooner had it touched my hand than my imperious prince called me his love, for all who understood his tongue to hear.
Bilbo stared at the stone. It was definitely a rock, not a ring. Trying to remember if this had actually said that a courtship gift was a ring proved fruitless. Bilbo's memory for poetry was excellent, but conversational details often slipped his mind. He scratched his head. Are you quite certain? That is, not to speak ill of Keely, whose friendship I value quite highly, but is there any chance that he acted improperly? I feel very sure that dwarven courtship gifts are always rings.
Indeed, my friend, I tell you that is not the case. I am aware, in particular, of one dwarf who has recently given a mithril coat of mail, a gold medallion, a frying pan, of all things, and some other secret present that is only known vaguely to Keely because my beloved is an irredeemable gossip and eavesdropper. In this case, I believe that the one to be courted already had a very valuable ring, and the giver did not wish to risk refusal by offering a lesser trinket of the same kind. Many consider it offensive to make more than one offer in the space of a single year. However, the circumstances are unusual. I understand that the gift of mithril was accepted and worn, but invalidated by some trouble that followed. The other gifts were accepted, but never worn in public, and so the question of whether the courtship will be allowed remains unresolved.
Bilbo stared at Tauriel. It took quite a while for her words to make sense to him, but she waited with elvish patience. Then he rushed from the room as though the flames of smog once again licked at his bare heels. A wheelbarrow was easy enough to come by. There were building projects going on all over Erebor, and no one was attending any of them since it was a holiday. Bilbo was a burglar. He took one. He'd return it eventually. Quick as a flash, or as fast as a hobbit could run at least, he was back in his rooms, loading it up, jerking the mithril coat over his head. Bilbo jammed the flower crown down upon it for good measure. There was no way to be sure if Tauriel was absolutely correct, but even if she turned out to be only slightly more informed than Bilbo was himself, he could not afford to take chances. So much time had already been wasted. Racing back to the Hall of History, and Bilbo did not see why the party could not have been held somewhere closer to his residence in the royal wing. He bounced the wheelbarrow merrily before him. Hope was nothing but a honeybee buzzing in his chest that might yet be blown away before nesting more permanently, but perhaps not hoping enough had been the cause of all this disappointment, if Tauriel was to be believed. Well, if Tauriel was to be believed, he had a chance, a real chance to be with Thorn was worth any effort. When he reached the hall, he heard shouting within, but the hobbit paid it no mind. Abandoning the wheelbarrow was necessary. He couldn't bring mining equipment into a party, not even the dwarvish one. Instead, he tucked his lovely frying pan into his belt, hoping it would stay. Then he placed the heavy chain around his neck and carefully lifted the enormous gold medallion. Taking a deep breath, he dared to enter the fray.
"Have shown to be no better than the rest of your faithless kin,"
Thorin was shouting.
"Never again will I suffer your presence, or that of any other elf, banishment, and none of your cursed ilk shall ever again be welcome in my halls."
Bilbo stopped then, staring at the circle of shocked dwarves surrounding the stoic Tauriel as she was berated by the gang. Keely stood beside her, looking miserable, but he did not intervene in her defense. For her part, Tauriel glanced over at the door where Bilbo stood and smiled. She did appear to be extremely amused.
"You dare mock me!"
Thorin's voice was a roar, but Tauriel's silent laughter did not diminish.
"To jest about secrets of the heart is an offense to all dwarfs. Yet what does an elf care of the pain she causes? We are nothing but fools for your amusement. Yet I say again that you are filth, and you will not make sport of me or my hobbit."
"Steady on, Thorin." Bilbo said, his own voice trembled a little, for it cut deeply to think that Tauriel had been playing a joke on him. Part of him almost agreed with the king's rage, but of course she deserved to get a little of her own back after the amount of vitriol she had to deal with every day in Erebor. Of course it made sense for her to mock dwarven courtships when she was barely allowed to hold her own, and no one seemed to care at all what elvish customs entailed. It simply hurt. He had not sought to be the target of such merriment. However, such disappointment was not enough to keep a hobbit from defending his friend. The king whirled around to look at Bilbo and froze. Laughter broke out like a wildfire, raging through the hall, as every dwarf present immediately saw the humor in Tauriel's teasing. Corn purses were tossed about, and Bilbo couldn't help noticing more than a few flying in Gandalf's direction.
"Silence!"
The king bellowed, still staring at Bilbo. Everyone obeyed, but that was worse, for instead of laughing, they all simply stared and smirked. Utterly mortified, Bilbo tried to ease the situation by joining in with a little laugh of his own. Unfortunately, it came out sounding very flat. "You have to admit, Thorin, it is a little funny, me thinking you'd give me well, and after you wouldn't take my ring." He forced another small chuckle. "I'd call it very silly." Hopefully no one else would call it otherwise. Bilbo knew how ridiculous he must look, decked out in mithril, weighed down by gold and jewels, with a frying pan tucked into his belt, and a crown upon his head like the fool of April at a spring fair.
"I would not take your ring."
Thorin's voice was a harsh rasp.
"How bitterly you wept when I refused it."
Blinking quickly, Bilbo tried to put a stop to whatever apologies were about to be made. "Right," the hobbit coughed.
You were quite clear about that, and I'm sorry to... Well, I'm sorry for everything, but most of all for making an ass of myself and disrupting the party. I was confused, happy to make amends to everyone, but I really have to be going just now. His arms ached from holding the heavy medallion, and the bejeweled chain felt like it was choking him. Turning, he took 3 quick steps back to the exit. Happily, his stolen wheelbarrow was still just on the other side of the door. Behind him, Bilbo heard a great commotion, but he couldn't turn back. Much as he wanted to help Tauriel and make sure Thorn apologized properly for all of the horrible things he'd been saying, the little hobbit had finally reached the end of his courage. He could not face Thorn's sympathy again, not when his hopes had been so unexpectedly raised. He could not face all of his friends laughing at his broken heart. So he ran. He ran to the one place in Erebor where he was guaranteed to find solace. He ran to his mushroom mine.